Hello, this is Bill Moreland with Bankreg Data. Today is October 22nd, 9:30 Eastern Time. I'm going to review Washington Federal, who is one of the largest banks. They're the second largest bank to file so far in Q3. And I wanted to basically walk through what we're seeing fresh off, the data's fresh off the presses, so to speak. First thing you notice is there's a big acquisition here. 24 Q1, they went from 22 billion to 30 billion. So I always find this interesting. This is a little off topic, but I'm already getting off tangents. This is Luther Burbank, right? And so essentially is about an $8.3 billion firm, asset bank at that point in time. So I think this is somewhat hilarious. One, I'm always bothered by this. And look, I'm a capitalist, right? I'm an entrepreneur. But I do question what the hell's the value of mergers. He's basically looking at the number of staff is down 350 people, right? So you're talking 15% of the staff have been let go. And Burbank was basically firing 60, 70 of their employees going into the merger. So one, there's a ton of jobs that have been displaced, right? The second thing is look at the branches, right? The number of offices have been shrunk. Now, possibly some of those were back office. But the big one here is you see the big increase in assets, but then the assets have just run all the way down to $26 billion. So you really have to ask yourself, what would WAFD have been on their own with just some decent organic growth? You could probably make a pretty good argument, maybe $23.5, $24 billion. So I'm not sure what they paid for Luther Burbank, but clearly 2 years into this, they're marginally bigger than what they would have potentially been on their own had they just stayed independent. So what you hope is that there's going to be an impact on income, right? Because otherwise, what's the point? So we go to income and expense. I'm going to use pre-tax. And what we're basically seeing here is, remember, the merger was 24 Q1. So there's a big drop. I'm going to be generous. We'll use tax equivalent. So if there's any munis or anything out there that are securities that are tax exempt. So basically you see the drop right there. But if we come in and we look at this, it isn't exactly like this is accretive to earnings. So you really have to ask, what's the point, right? We're 145 basis points, 150 basis points, down to 108, 130 basis points. And then post-acquisition, they're struggling. All right, so they do report the last 2 quarters that they're starting to claw back up to about 1.2, 1.21. So I always like to look, how do we get there, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to basically take a look. Have they been taking securities realized losses? No, they haven't been doing that. Have they been setting aside a lot of provision? And what we see is they did set aside some provision going back a while ago, and then there's a big number after the acquisition. But they really have not been setting aside much provision, right? 4 basis points, 3 basis points, 5 basis points is a percent to average assets. So one of the ways they've been able to prop up their income is they're really not setting aside much provision. And provision is an expense. And what provision is it basically fills the allowance or reserve or ALLL bucket for future losses. And so when we come in and we look at net charge-offs, we do see they are taking some charge-offs. So 5 million, 5 million, 1 million, we're talking 11, 12 million. How much have they done in provision? 7, 8. So they've not even replaced basically what they've taken in charge-off. So I'm laying the groundwork, right? Acquisition, firing a lot of people, closing operations, assets have been shrinking, marginally bigger post-acquisition. You're not seeing an income lift. And whatever little income lift that they've recently been getting is because they're basically not taking enough provision to basically handle that. Curious, what's their net interest margin? So I'll be the most generous, tax equivalent. I'll toggle to average earning assets. Slowly creeping up, but 276 isn't exactly gangbusters, right? But it is making improvement. So I am curious. Let's go take a look at Tier 1 capital. And so don't look at the peers here, these peer numbers. This is one of the few large banks to have filed. The vast majority of banks that filed this early in the cycle are sub 1 billion, sub 2 billion. So there's really no real good peer group for these guys. But basically they're okay. They're not eating into capital. So that's a good sign. Not as reserved as they once were, but they're better reserved than they were pre-acquisition. So there's a positive there. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the main page. And I'm going to scroll down to essentially Century. And so this our Century event engine is basically going to identify quarter over quarter changes. And there's a separate section for it. So this looks at 125 metrics and basically looks at anything that's delta quarter over quarter significantly changed. And what we see, now remember, very little provision, more charge-offs the last 3 quarters than provision. Our delinquencies going up, but of course. So we can see that the non-owner occupied portfolio has gone from about 25 million to 29 to 47 to 70, $69.4 billion. So there's a $23 million increase in late stage non-performing CRE. C&I, all right, so going back a couple years ago, pre-acquisition, they were high, then it kind of delted down, and then it's been really low, and then it spiked 11 million. So now we're up 22 million, 23 million. Now we're up 36, 35, right? So 22 plus 11 is 33. Multifamily goes up, comes down, and then pops up 7. So we're seeing some significant increases. You also see a multifamily in early stage. So let's go in and take a look. We're going to basically pop into Loans 2012, which is the more granular data series starting in 2012. Once again, you see the big acquisition, and then you see a rundown, right? They're just running down. And so if you're curious, and we should be, if assets are going down, what's the liabilities doing, right? So I probably should go back and talk of that before we jump into asset quality a little bit more. I look at liquidity. I look at core deposits. Now, to their credit, post-acquisition, they didn't actually run off a lot of deposits. They were clearly running them off, probably because of rate differentials. But after acquisition, they did a pretty good job. You're always going to see a little bit of drop post-acquisition because people just don't want to do business. That's why they were doing business with someone else, or they decided to go somewhere else. But all in all, actually commendable. Pretty good job of flat core deposits. So if assets are down, core deposits are flat, where is that coming from? So I go to deposits, and I'm going to take a look at brokered. That number is actually going up. So they are relying more and more. There's the acquisition, 5.73, and you can see they've added $400 million of brokered deposits. Why? So if core deposits are flat and the bank is shrinking, why do broker deposits? And I'm going to guess this is an interest rate play. If I go to liabilities, if I go to FHLB, there's the acquisition right there. So Luther had about a $1.1 billion. And then so that made sense why the number would jump. It's not taking any additional more. It's just a reflection on the call report of 2 entities versus 1. They immediately let it go. So as the bank shrinks, essentially what they're shrinking is their FHLB advances, right? They're taking those off the table. Other borrowed, this is going to be the BTFP money, but they've not had any of that for a long, long time. So primarily what we're basically seeing is the bank is core deposits are stable, they're shrinking FHLB, and that's how assets are coming down. So let's go ahead and go back here on the right-hand side, and we're going to go look at delinquencies or total loans. So naturally, they've shrunk a bunch, probably sales post-acquisition, very standard. Total delinquencies have spiked. So we were sitting at 30, 40 basis points, 48 basis points, 42, 51, and now we're up to 83. I also look at the restructured debt. You always want to see what percent of the loans are being modified. Popping down, none of this should come as a surprise because we saw that non-owner occupied was elevated. So this is the 90 days past due, which is non-performing, up to 2.26. So let's just start cycling through the non-performing loans. Those total aggregate up. So 63 basis points, still reasonably good. Don't worry about that number. Once again, these are more reflective of similar sized banks. These are smaller banks that are going to look much better. So 63 basis points versus 105, 106, still pretty good, but it's clearly deteriorating, right? 60 million, 83 million, 129 million. So we'll just start cycling through. Mortgages had a bit of a big jump. Multifamily has gone up, has gone down, has gone up. Did they take charge-offs? There you go, right? So they took some charge-offs. So that's part of the reason that the delinquencies went down. Curious, we'll just basically take a look. REO, right? So REO is the other component to this. If they're selling them, then we wouldn't see that. But I like to also, so I'm going to go to assets because that's what REO is. This is real estate owned. And I'm going to come down and take a look. There's multifamily. So right here. So and this is going to come in as well. So when we look at this big drop here to here is an REO component, probably some delinquencies. But you notice how they took very little charge-offs. So the charge-off number on a real estate-backed loan is not going to be the loan amount. It's going to be what the spread is between the loan amount and the underlying asset valuation. So you can see that they kept it at 5.1, and then basically they took a $928,000 charge-off. So we get a pretty good feel for what they're trying to do with the valuation. Sometimes you'll see banks take zero charge-offs, and they would basically take a $6 million, right, REO component. So let's just start cycling back through. Non-owner occupied, obviously this is the big one. Let's take early stage delinquencies. So these guys are going straight in. Non-performing going straight into late stage. Are they taking charge-offs? All right, so we do see a charge-off the last couple of quarters. I come down here and you do see as the numbers start to go down, you do see that they're starting to climb back up. So you got charge-offs coming in, REO coming in. There are some liquidations. So let's go take a look, right? So we know they're taking REO. I'm going to go to income and expense. I'm going to go to non-interest income. And I see something down here that catches my eye, which is REO sales liquidation. Now, when a bank takes a $900,000, right, on multifamily charge off, and they take a $5.1 million valuation on the multifamily loan REO component, there's a second valuation that takes place. That's when they liquidate it. So when you see a bank that consistently, what is that? 6 out of the last 7 quarters, they're taking negative hits again. So it means what they're doing is they're consistently undervaluing, they're undercharging off, they're overvaluing the REO component. And I don't know if this is, well, I can see. I could argue back in here, this is, this night 2000, I would say 2016 all the way to 2023 Q4. You're going to take some gains, you're going to take some losses. You're expecting that ping, ping, ping. But when you see this consistently, they're overvaluing the asset and they're having to take a secondary loss. And the reason, one, it could be they're trying to manage charge-offs and provision, right? You want to keep provision low because it's an expense, but you're still going to eat that expense. So one could be it's intentional. 2 could be their valuation process is not real good. But when this bank starts taking charge-offs, now you have to realize this management team has a recent history of overvaluing the REO component. So let's go back. Basically, just start cycling through C&I. There's that big one that popped in. 67 basis points. I'm not worried. But you're now seeing multiple portfolios have multiple increases in delinquencies. Construction, other land. That was a couple of quarters ago. So now you have a third, right? You're now starting to see multiple loan portfolios have issues. Am I worried about 31? No, you could make a case that every one of these is no big deal. But is the bank better now than it was 6 months ago or 9 months ago or a year ago? And I would argue it's hard to say that's the case. So there's some portfolios that are basically shrinking. Home equity's down, so they're looking okay. So let's come in and we're going to basically bounce back up to the aggregate and we're going to take a look at loan modifications. This is the big one. This is how, even to the point we've changed the rules, right? I nag on this incessantly, but it's important to understand that as delinquency starts skyrocketing, banks are going to start modifying a ton of loans. Well, maybe they modified them and put them on non-accrual. No. They only put 12% on non-accrual, right? So 88% of that is extend and pretend. Well, maybe it's down. No, it's probably not down. It's not. That is a reporting artifact of changing the rules. So once somebody bounces up, if they make 12 payments, anywhere in here they can make 12 payments, after 12 consecutive payments, you're allowed to take some people off. So even looking at this number and saying, well, the number's down, I'd be willing to bet if we had real reporting like we did pre-2023 Q1, this bank's not down. Their loan modifications continue to climb. Are they doing it across the board? So what you look for is a series of management decisions. And I always say this, it's a gateway drug. So sure enough, every single portfolio. So let's come in and take a look at C&I. All right. So they've been, this is crazy. All right. So they're modifying 3.5-4% of their book. This is huge because I guarantee you they don't have 4% allowance on this portfolio. So if we come in and we look at delinquencies, perfect example. Well, Bill, not every portfolio is doing bad, but yeah, it is. You don't have to modify $70 million of loans and not put them on non-accrual so they don't show up in delinquency. You get to report low delinquencies, but you're modifying a huge percent of your book. All right, let's go back. Non-owner occupied. Oh, nice. Did they put it on non-accrual? So we'll take a look. So over here, we're going to go non-owner occupied. So we see the delinquency skyrocket. We see the loan modifications, but this is performing. So there's total modifications. Notice how the numbers drop. So what this means is there is a fair chunk on non-accrual. So that's one note right there. That's a note that wasn't making payments and is slowly starting to pay down. So it is slowly making some payments. It's on non-accrual, no interest-free income. Then the number drops. So we don't really know what happened there. But if we look, that's extend and pretend. So their total delinquencies jumped 23 million and their extend and pretend jumped 29 million. If we look at aggregate portfolio stress for commercial real estate, non-owner occupied for Washington Federal, the numbers have basically gone from 90 basis points, 120, 180, 350. So this portfolio is falling apart on them, right? So we're going to go ahead. We're going to go back to loan modifications. I'm going to go back to performing. So this is extend and pretend. This doesn't include any modifications that have been put on non-accrual. Cycle down, owner occupied. Cycle up. Come over here on this side, look at owner occupied. So once again, you're seeing very low delinquencies, but you're seeing that they're modifying 70 basis points, 80 basis points, up to 200 basis points. Then the number goes down. But you can't trust it, right? You cannot trust this reporting. It's possible it's gotten better. But traditionally, the only way it gets better is they pay down the loan, they charge off, or they sell it. That's it. Those three. But with the new reporting change, not so new anymore, this could be just fake. And so we really have no idea if that $5 million could be $6 million, right? There could be $6 million drop there and a $5 million drop. So you're looking at 11. There could be $26 million worth of performing loan modifications where they lowered the payment on that portfolio. And you would be looking at 2.5-3% of the book. So you just can't trust the numbers. But yeah, they're restructuring more debt. So let's come in. Multifamily. Oh, geez. So you start to see the trend, right? Multifamily, they are starting to do more loan modifications. So what we're looking at here is more delinquencies, more loan modifications. Come over on the left-hand side, you look at provision. They're not taking enough provision to even handle the charge-offs that they're taking. I've already identified that. So their pre-tax net operating is up marginally, still historically very low. But let's go take a look. Are they reserved? Asset quality, allowance. All right. So what they're going to say, and what the press is going to repeat ad nauseum, is this bank is more reserved. And technically, they're not, because they have $203.8 million versus $199. So post-acquisition, right there, 2024 Q1 was the acquisition. They had a little bit more reserves. They were at 95 basis points. But through the magic of a shrinking denominator, they can have less allowance, but they can actually report that they're more reserved than they've been a year and a half. But this is the wrong ratio. This is just not correct. So what you have to do is you have to look at reserves to NPLs. Adjusted NPLs are going to basically take, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to basically look at NPLs. There's the non-performing gross. Do they have any government guarantees? Nope. And there's basically the adjusted NPL number. Once again, don't look at the peer numbers because they're incomplete for the peers. But if we look at reserves, so this is reserves. How many dollars of reserves do you have for every dollar? We're down 203.8, 199.7. But notice how during the same time frame we've gone from 62 million to 129. So if we look at how many dollars of reserves they have pre-acquisition, at one point they were $5 and $6. Are they reserved? No, they're not. And I know it looks like they're reserved, but I would tell people is banks are never reserved. Now, are they reserved enough that you could justify what they're doing from an income? Yeah, I'll give you that. But you're not reserved when you start taking more delinquencies, right? So the 5.6 post-acquisition now is 3.33, 3.2, 3. Then you see the number goes to 2.8, 3.3, 2.4. Now we're down to 155. So they're not reserved. Once again, don't look at that number. We won't know that number, but I bet you peers are at least $2. So coming down here, forget peers. Are they more reserved than? No, not even close. This is $1.55. They, at least in the last 10 years, this bank has not been reserved. But even this ratio is incorrect. This is the adjusted coverage ratio, where we add in the extend and pretend. This bank is half as reserved as it was a year ago. Half. So look at the 10-year. By any stretch of the imagination, the income that this bank is showing post-acquisition, what was the point, right? We bought Luther. We're starting to fire a bunch of people. We're making it more efficient, but we're really not generating any more income. Recently, we've started to show more income, but realistically, it's because they're not reserved. They're not taking enough reserves. And so from a future perspective, is extend and pretend going to save this bank? No, I don't think so, because you can just look at their delinquencies. They're up basically $64 million. So delinquencies are up $64 million. None of it is government guaranteed, and they basically in the quarter set aside $3 million. This bank is not reserved. As always, I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please reach out and give me a call.